So can you introduce to our viewer who you are and which organization you work for?
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for having me. As you have already said, my name is Lelethu Nogwavu. I am from South Africa. I work for an NGO called Africa Unite. We are basically a youth empowerment organization that works with citizens, migrants, as well as refugees. The main goal is basically to enhance social cohesion. We work under the title or the theme or the slogan, building human rights communities. So that is essentially what we do in a nutshell. But yes, thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you so much, Lelethu. Okay, Lelethu, tell us a little bit about Africa United.
I think the biggest thing, and as I've said, we are very youth-focused because when Africa Unite started, the main issue at the time was xenophobia. It was back in 2001, long ago, in one of the townships in South Africa. And as I've said, xenophobia was a huge thing back then at the time. And we noticed that the main perpetrators of, most of these atrocities and, the violent attacks on migrants was from young people. So then we decided, or the director of the organization decided at the time, that it would be best to bring young people together and speak about such issues and raise these dialogues where we can talk about, the issues and why we perpetrate or why people perpetrated or did those specific violence attacks on migrants at the time. And it has been building since then. And I think the main focus has been that we focus on creating dialogues because we believe that societies or communities should bring their own solutions because they are the ones who experience these issues and they are the ones who cause these issues. So then we bring people together, we have these dialogues on whatever issue that, for instance, at the time, it was those xenophobic attacks. So young people came together, they came and spoke about the issues. We were able to remove some stigmas. We were able to come up with many different programs that are now being used. And those programs are generated from the communities themselves without people being aware and actually coming up with solutions, but it's actually the people affected by those issues that come up with solutions. So for instance, with our programs, one of our programs, we call it the Human Rights Peer Education Program, where we bring about young people from different communities in South Africa, say for instance, from different backgrounds as well. So for instance, we'd have someone from Langa in the townships, we would have someone from, Rondebosch, that's a suburb, but we bring about different young people from different backgrounds, and they all are taken into a training, or we call our training the Human Rights School, where we actually give these young people some usable skills and some usable knowledge that they can take back to their communities and solve whatever problem that they have in their communities. Say, for instance, if, one of the issues in that particular community is xenophobia, for instance, the young people themselves would recognize that and identify those issues in their communities and bring about solutions themselves, working together with their communities. So they go out there, they make these dialogues. And I always make an example about myself. I started at Africa Unite as a peer educator. At the time, I was in law school at the University of the Western Cape. I was doing my second year in law, and I was very passionate about women issues and gender-based violence. And I went on to the training, and I came back to my institution, and I was able to sort of make or do these dialogues and organize some dialogues where I would speak with my fellow students and lecturers and different people in the community that I was a part of. So that's sort of the model that we use, where we focus on people identifying their own issues in their communities, also generating solutions themselves without us bringing those solutions for them. But then we support them in whatever endeavors that they choose to solve those particular issues. But we do have a lot of other different programs besides the peer education program, where we, do some conflict mediation, some orientations in different communities. And our specific focus is usually on townships where there's, rife issues, social ills like xenophobia, like crime and things like that. But ultimately, what we want to do is build human rights communities. And we do that through dialogues. We do that through talking. We do that through finding solutions as the community members and as the community ourselves.
Thank you so much for all those strong words and commitment. Lelethu, I really appreciate all about your efforts been doing in South Africa. Tell us a little bit about how, according to your experience working to both sides, people who has been affected and those who was the one who was committing that crime. Tell us a little bit about how the xenophobia started, how this can be start among population. What is the trigger that can be the cause of xenophobia, and how people can detect these things that is started can bring us to what we can go so far, like a crime, like xenophobia. How can this start and how to prevent it?
I think, Eric, the biggest thing is usually that I think people misunderstand each other in so many ways, and especially people who come from different countries or from, different areas. We tend, as humans, we tend to misunderstand anything that we do not, come together with, or that we are not familiar with. So I think the biggest thing then is that there's usually these stigmas with South Africans where we lack an understanding of other people. So when people come into South Africa, we have all these stigmas that we create. So for instance, at times when we do these dialogues, we find out that, some of the stigmas and the thinking with South Africans is that foreigners or people who come from other countries are just here to take our jobs. They're just here to take our women. They are here to, to cause havoc, without understanding that even with people who come into South Africa, they are also maybe running away from a certain havoc from their country and they're seeking refuge. We have refugees, we have asylum seekers. So we don't really understand why foreigners are in South Africa. And so our reaction to that is usually then violence, and usually that misunderstanding where we start with this misconceptions, we start with the stigmas, and then it becomes, actual physical attacks. But I think another big thing is that, obviously there's different causes and different things that have led to xenophobia in South Africa. But I think one of the biggest ones is the fact that we do not understand that certain things are as a result of South African history. Obviously, South Africa comes from a very, very painful history of apartheid. And, now we have issues of unemployment, we have issues of crime, we have all of that. And because we cannot really find what the cause of that is, we usually use migrants to make that or to put the blame on. So we usually scapegoat using migrants. So those are some of the causes. So sometimes it's usually just a stigma that people grow up with in their communities, and that's what they're taught, growing up, that, migrants just come here to take your jobs and all that. And sometimes it's usually the stigmas that they are the reason why, there's crime, and all of these terrible things that we usually blame on migrants. But in actual fact, we have an issue in our South African, system. We have an issue in our economy. And it's as a result of the past and the history that we've come through, as a result of our politicians and corruption and all of that. But not everyone understands that. And that's why we then focus on doing these dialogues, on having these dialogues and making sure that we educate each other. We understand that there's a difference between someone who comes into South Africa to commit a crime and someone who ran away from their country because their life was under threat. And for instance, we teach people, or we try to educate each other about terms like refugees, like asylum seekers, because people do not understand those simple terms. So then, because they don't understand that, they usually resort to xenophobia and attacking foreigners. But I mean, like I said, that's the reason why we have these dialogues, and we try as much as we can to have these dialogues in communities where we educate each other, we understand each other, and we get to know other people. And it's not just through dialogues. We also do, for instance, there's a program that we have called Celebration of Diversity, where we actually try and learn about each other's cultures. So for instance, say on Heritage Day, we would have different people from different countries where we can learn about, you know, for instance, Burundi, we can learn about Congo and the culture there, and, you know, what they actually do, so that we can see all the differences and similarities in our lives, and actually realize that we are the same people. And we are all for the same thing. It's just we misunderstand each other. For instance, another one of our programs that we call skills sharing, where we would get people, mostly migrants, where we would get them to relay the skills that they have. So for instance, if a person is an entrepreneur, they would teach that to South African locals, so that you can understand that migrants are not just here to take away, because that's a stigma. They are also here to add value to the country, and, you know, not just to take away everything like people believe or understand. So all the small things that we do to try and create that social cohesion, to try and solve the issue of xenophobia, because it's really just misunderstandings that usually cause these attacks. It's a lack of understanding, it's a lack of knowledge. So our focus is then on that, making sure that we educate people and make them understand that this is the real issue. This is, you know, what you can learn from other people, and this is what, you know, we can do moving forward, working together and not fighting against each other.
Wow, Lelethu, I'm really touched about this commitment. You know, the history has really impacted the South African people, and this has a huge impact on today's society. So, Lelethu, how hard is for someone who has been affected, who lost his family member to what happened? How hard is for that person to forgive and to become in a good relationship with the person who committed that crime?
I think that usually depends from person to person. But I mean, like I said, I think the biggest thing is that it's very painful and difficult being misunderstood. And I can only imagine, I myself am not a migrant, but I can imagine coming from another country, for instance, and getting into a country and being misunderstood and being, you know, attacked or something like that. I'm sure that's extremely difficult. But I usually find that with the interventions we hold, is that people just want to be understood. And I think that's why the dialogues actually work, is because when we sit down with everyone and everyone is able to express themselves and share their challenges and share, you know, whatever it is that has been bothering them, it's usually easier to work together and move forward. It's usually easier for them to see, oh, this person is actually not a bad person, they're just misunderstanding me. And it's easier to explain and share and show yourself without, you know, being attacked and all of that. So I think the biggest thing is that people just want to be understood. They just want to, you know, share their challenges as well, that I am doing this because of this reason, and, you know, this is the reason why I do things the way I do. So usually it doesn't take much. It just takes being able to express yourself in a space where you will be understood and being able to hear the other person's side of the story. And that's why we have that emphasis on dialogues in communities.
Great. So you talk about the culture. It's important to know others' culture so that we can stay in the perfect harmony. So what's the impact of sharing the culture? I come, for example, with my culture. I come with that culture in South Africa. I want to share that culture with the people I met there. What will be the impact of that culture?
I think that's another thing that, you know, most people always miss, is that they don't understand how huge of an impact culture makes. And small things like language, you know, music, dance, food, all of those things, they have such a huge impact in creating social cohesion and, you know, in making us understand each other and in working together. And that's why we use that model as well, because we have come to understand that there's a huge value in using those sort of methods in trying to create social cohesion. For instance, language, that's just learning someone's language and, you know, being able to say hi in, for instance, Lingala. That means a lot to a Congolese person. They already feel at home. You know, it's easier to start conversations in that way and understand each other. You literally just open up. If I came to you, Eric, and I greeted you in your language, and you know I'm South African, and you know I'm a Xhosa woman, you would open up, you would smile, you know, because that's how much of an impact that has. You realize, for instance, with things like music and dance, we have literally the same rhythms in Africa. We have the same types of dance, and, you know, things like sports as well. It's very easy to integrate and to get along when those things are at play. If you put people into a room and you play some African music, you can instantly see them dance and being happy, regardless of where that music would be from. So that's the sort of impact that it has. It makes us open up, but it also makes us realize we are the same. We have, you know, similar languages, we have similar dances, we have similar cultures, we have, you know, similar everything, and it makes us realize that we are not foreign to each other, not at all. We are the same people, and then it makes us open up and want to talk about things and want to understand each other instead of just attacking and, you know, and just blaming everything on each other.
Great. So, Lelethu, thank you so much. I will start to say Siyabonga Matota. Siyabonga Matota. I'm trying to enter your culture already. So, okay. I've been reading and watching what Africa United has been done so far. Amazing job that you've been doing. Well done. So, tell me a little bit about those people who learn something new from Africa United, where they work, where they're dancing, where the knowledge, whatever they learn, how this empower their life, how this empowering their life, how their life has changed.
Let me just make an example with one, for instance, of my favorite programs. And, you know, this is not specific to just maths and science, but this is just an example of one of the programs that I really admire so much, and I've seen the change in there. So we have, you know, a tutor, and she's from the DRC. She's extremely good with maths, and we had this issue in one of the schools that we work with in the townships, where we had learners failing and dropping maths and science because it's obviously there's a stigma that it's difficult and all of that. And we invited this tutor to come as part of the skill sharing program. And how the program even started was that we had a dialogue. One of our interns noticed that there was this issue in the Western Cape where, you know, schools or people were dropping maths and science, and it was being phased out as a result. And obviously that has ripple implications in South Africa. That means we won't have any doctors, we won't have, you know, any engineers and all of that. So after that dialogue, one of the solutions was that let's start this pilot project in the school that we work with, where we will try and improve, you know, the grades and try and improve the maths and science performance in South Africa and in that particular school. And we usually start in very small numbers and all of that. So we picked about 15 students there, and we already had a tutor. Her name is Annie. She's from the DRC. She's an amazing maths teacher, maths and science teacher. And we picked up about 15 learners from different grades, from grade 5 till 7. And all of them were struggling. And, when they started with the program, they were doing, very, very terrible in their studies. And it's not nice to watch. Obviously, when they get to high school, by the time they get to high school, would be an issue because they would not want to choose maths and science. So we realized that not only can we create a change in the maths and science, but we can also improve their behavior in terms of how they behave towards migrants, because most of the learners are South African citizens, and they are from the township specifically. So that was us hitting two birds with one stone. So we said that the tutor would not only just tutor them with maths and science, but also maybe do some quizzes to help assist in changing their behaviors and also understanding other countries, not just the DRC, but other countries. So that's just one of the small impacts or the small programs that we do in making sure that people understand each other's culture. But the great thing about that, Eric, is that, for instance, now with the latest results of the learners, we had 2 learners who obtained distinctions, and only 1 learner out of the 15 actually failed, but everyone else passed. So wow. There was an impact, not just in their performance academically, but also in the way that they view and understand migrants. Now they understand small terms like, what is a migrant? What is a refugee? Where is the DRC? What is Zimbabwe famous for? Or what resources are produced in Burundi? Those small things. But we do it through certain interventions where we are able to also make an improvement in their lives, but also make them understand that, the tutor is actually from the DRC and she's not different from me. So now they are able to understand that she's not a foreign person, or she's not this bizarre human being from, another planet. She's actually just from another country. And she is exactly like me. She's exactly like my mom. But also doing that with the understanding that she has skills that I need and that I will use. Like, she has taught me maths and science. Now I've gotten a distinction in maths and science, and I've done well. So it's programs like that for me that usually show that amount of impact, and that really impressed me, that small things can really change, a whole lot. So even with culture, with language, for instance, we will sometimes just have conversations and teach each other, because even in our office space, we're a very diverse group. We're able to learn, certain different languages, and you're able to understand, things without having to Google, understand, certain small terms in Lingala, certain small terms in Swahili. So it's just small things like that in culture, in language, in academics as well, in music, in dance, in all those things that we're able to integrate with each other and understand each other. So some of the learners, for instance, are now able to greet the tutor in her language. Imagine being greeted by young learners from South Africa in your language. How does that make you feel? But also, what does it change with the learners themselves? They're able to also go and teach other people in their homes and in their communities that, migrants are actually people. And yeah, it's literally just in small things like that.
Great. So Lelethu, I'm so happy to have discussion with you, because this program idea is to make people to feel happy where they are not happy. The idea is to put people together by talking to the issue that affect huge number of people. So how we can get a solution to those problems. That's the target of this program. So I'm excited to have all those information. It's so amazing. So let's talk about migrants. We know that migrant is someone that's leaving his country to another country, maybe for work, for better life. Each one has his reason for him to leave his country. It can be a political problem that pull him out. It can be a problem in family. There is many issues about migrants. So tell me a little bit about how the migration of Africa can impact, let's say, we ourselves, our own continent. For example, someone who come like from Congo, who come from Cameroon, who come to South Africa, who build a business that can empower South African or other black people, how we can first talk about our own immigration before we go for the Eastern one, the one who went to Europe, how our brother can come to our continent, on our country, can impact our society.
I think one of the biggest things is that, and that I think is one of the issues here in South Africa, is that we don't really understand the impact migration has. We always view the negative side of it. We don't understand that a lot of, for instance, I have had a lot of lecturers, even in university, who were from different countries, from Zim, from Ghana, and all of that. So that's just one of the impacts that it has, and that we have now this rich and diverse group of people who come in to liberate certain skills into Africa, into the economy, into the education system. But also that is helpful in that it also helps us learn about Africa in general. Instead of, because I've heard a lot about people, especially in South Africa. I'm sure you're very much aware of this. South Africans are very, I don't want to say reserved, but we really are when it comes to traveling and going to other countries. And it's very difficult for us to learn about other countries, and not as open as other people. But if we are able to talk about and educate people on the benefits of actually traveling and leveraging your skills in Africa specifically, and putting your skills out there, and also getting skills from other people, if we understood the value in that, I think we would do so much better as a community. But like I said, usually, especially in South Africa, the issue is that we always view the negatives of migration, and that we always look at the fact that, no, we don't have enough jobs. Why are people coming in to take our jobs? We don't understand that, for instance, in some areas we lack, right? So for instance, say if we lack in math and science, then obviously if we can get someone from Zimbabwe, if we can get someone from Ghana to come and assist in that regard, then that helps South Africa, because that person will teach South Africa, and then we would be able to generate our own, math and science, scholars and people who can teach others. So that's just a small example of the impact of migration, especially in the African context. It's that we are able to leverage and give each other these skills that we need without taking away from our continent and just going to the Western side, because a lot of people, I think that's the goal for most Africans, is that I want to go to Europe, I want to go to America. They never think about, I want to go to South Africa, I want to go and, assist in this other African countries. And that's one of the reasons, or one of the reasons for that, is that we have been taught and we have been sort of, made to think that Europe is much better than Africa. But I feel like we have all that we need in Africa, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other. And like I said, for instance, in terms of resources, we have resources that Zimbabwe needs. Zimbabwe has resources that we need. It's not just mineral resources, but it's also skills that we have as people. Like I said, in education, we need certain skills. We need engineers. We need this, and other countries have that, and those countries are in Africa. So we're not just rich in mineral resources and all of that, but we also rich in scholars. We are rich in certain fields that we can be able to assist each other in that regard. But because we have this clouded judgment that whenever someone comes, they're coming to take, we don't understand that there's another side to it, where we're being assisted a lot by other countries, and we are also assisting other countries. And one of the things that we do at Africa United to try and solve that is we have this exchange program, for instance, with the peer educators, where we would get some young people from different countries. For instance, from Zimbabwe, we had one exchange peer educator from Zim this year. We bring in people from the DRC, we bring in people from many different other countries so that we can learn from each other. But we also try as well to take people out of South Africa, and they should go and see, and we make them go see other countries and what's happening in other countries, but also to also learn and see what we as South Africans can leverage, and what solutions we can come together and come up with as, you know, a continent, and not just as South Africa alone. So I think that's one of the things, but also educating, like I said, with the tutorial program we have, we usually try as well to educate the learners about other countries, because most the average South African child doesn't even understand or know where Zimbabwe is. They don't know where Burundi is. They don't know where Malawi is. You know, they don't understand that that's literally a neighboring country, or that's a country very much nearby to me. In their heads, it's actually another continent or somewhere, you know, very, very far. But it's actually neighboring countries and people that we should understand, because we always are in spaces together. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we always teach, and I think it's the media, it's a lot of things that teach people to aspire to Europe, to the European or the Western way of doing things, without understanding that we also have a lot in our communities. We have a lot in Africa as well to learn from each other.
Great. Can we say Africa? Thank you. Can you say Africa is the best way to be, is the best place to be? And what we can say about all African continents, all African country, should we go to really social dialogue so that we can move freely and talk each other and to build our Africa?
Yes, definitely. And that's what, you know, I've been trying to emphasize as well, is that that's why our work focuses on dialogues, because we need this honest conversations. We need these dialogues. They are necessary at this point, and they are a must. We have to talk about these things. We have to understand each other. We have to bring solutions ourselves. We have to identify the issues ourselves. So, you know, we can only do that through dialogues. We can sit down, or we should sit down and have those dialogues, difficult conversations, but they have to be heard. That's how we're gonna improve our continent.
Okay, so what has been the big success for Africa United? If we can say you reach your target, you reach your goal, what is the success for Africa United? What we can say?
I think, you know, there's quite a few you know, incidents that I can point out, you know, but I'll just point out just a few. I'll make an example with one dialogue or intervention we had in the township called Nyanga. It's the crime capital in the Western Cape. You know, it's rigged with crime, and we had an intervention there where we had a dialogue. And one of the issues that came up at the time during that dialogue was that the area only had one police station. So you can imagine with a place that's known to be, you know, the crime capital, or where crime is most rife, and there's only one police station. So through that dialogue, we were able to get another police station to be built and made. So that's just one of the few successes we've had. I think another one, for instance, in KZN, because we operate in three provinces. Johannesburg, we operate in KZN, which is called KwaZulu-Natal in full, where we had a dialogue on an issue where we realized that the learners, or the young people in a community called Lindelani, were struggling to get to the nearest library, which was extremely far. And they were exposed to, obviously, things like, you know, being attacked and being raped and all of that. So that was a huge issue in the community, because it put young people's lives in danger. but also not only did it put them in danger physically, but also their education, because you need a library to be able to be successful in school. You need textbooks, you need books, you need a quiet space to study from. So we had this dialogue, we brought people together, and we were able to advocate for a library to be built there. So the learners don't have to travel as far now to, go to the library. That's just a few of, of the interventions we've had. So for us, that is, I guess, success, when we see the small dialogues that we start in communities actually yield fruits and results that actually help other people. Hence our slogan that we're building human rights communities. We believe in using human rights to actually improve the lives of people. We believe in starting dialogues around human rights, that education is a human right. You should be educated. You deserve an education. So if not having a library in your community hinders you from getting an education, let us talk about it. Let's come up with a solution. If you're exposed to crime in your community, let's talk about it. Let's come up with a solution. Let's lobby. Let's speak to government. Let's speak to parliament. Let's do all of these conversations that are necessary to make sure that we see the results, and that whatever dialogue that we have yields a result and we actually see it. So for us, that is success, where we are able to not just have conversations with normal people in communities, but also we are able to use, or we are able as a community to go out there and lobby with government and lobby with parliament and lobby with other huge institutions and come up with results and actual tangible results that improve the lives of people in communities. So I think for us, that is the epitome of success, where we start very small, and like I said at the beginning, we're a very small NGO, but the amount of impact we have been able to make, because we genuinely believe in starting dialogues and actually identifying solutions as communities and working together. And that has yielded so many results. But that's just a few of, the successes of the interventions we've had in communities. Like, for instance, what I mentioned to you about the tutorial programs, where we see learners actually improving in math and science. That's a future doctor, that's a future engineer. And they could have easily failed if we hadn't had that dialogue, where we spoke about the fact that, young people or learners in the townships are failing because of the disadvantages that they face as a result of different, ills in South Africa. Now we are able to then come together and bring about a solution to assist that particular learner, to assist the person. But it all starts from a dialogue. It all starts with the community. It's a dialogue that involves the people that are affected. They come up with their own solutions. So that's success to us, being able to have those small dialogues, but end up, building the fruit.
Okay, so how do you see the feature of social dialogue in South Africa, especially, and in some African countries where there is like a conflict, let's say like Sudan, all those countries that is affected because of conflict, because of leaders, political, all those things that messed the country. How do you see the feature of a social dialogue? How can you compare the social dialogue in Africa and Europe?
I think one of the things that I really genuinely like about Africa, and I'm going to say, I see, firstly, let me just say, I think the future is very bright. Especially working with young people, you see very brave, very passionate young people that we work with, our peer educators, the leaders who work in schools, and even in primary schools. So you see the passion, you see the drive, you see the hunger to actually make a change in communities, and actually to build human rights communities in Africa and South Africa specifically. So I think the future is really bright in that aspect if we work hard. Not to say we don't have a long way to go, we still have a long way to go, but I think our young people are passionate enough, and we have that ability and that capability. But I do think that there's a lot of young people out there, African young people, doing amazing things and having these conversations. And that is as a result of the social ills that we face. Now, if you think about it in Europe, of course, they do face a lot of issues and a lot of problems, but I don't think they're as rife as Africa. So I think that's what fuels young people in South Africa mostly. And I think that's why we have that brighter future, because we have that hunger to fight. We've always had to fight for everything. We've had people who came before us who fought for everything. Just an example, in South Africa, we've had people who had to fight the apartheid government. And now we have, as young people, to fight all these social ills that we have. Load shedding, we have to fight unemployment and all of that. And that forces us to have dialogues. So that's one of the reasons why we have Africa Unite, organizations like Africa Unite. It's because we are forced, we sort of have to do all of that. As compared to Europe, the developed, they don't have much that they're fighting for. So I don't think they're more compelled than Africans to actually fight. But I do think definitely we do have a very bright future in terms of having dialogues and actually creating change and making change.
Great. So before we finish this interview, what you can remember about someone who was whether committing crime or was affected because of a social problem, what can you remember of the words that person told you after finding his freedom regarding social dialogue?
I think one of the biggest things, and I always take it back to one of our learners, he works for one of the biggest law firms in Africa now. He's a lawyer. He came from a very, very small township called Delft. It's known for crime, it's known for gang violence, you know, and obviously being a young student at the time, he became a part of one of our programs called School Club. And in that particular program, he learned about leadership, and he sort of changed his ways, I would say, because he was also getting into to the whole gang violence and all of that. And obviously, at a young age, you are easily influenced. But because he was part of the leadership program, we were able to sort of give him those tools and skills to be a leader in his community. And he did a lot during his time as a student leader. But he actually passed his degree, his law degree, with a summa cum laude, which is the highest distinction in university. And every time he testifies, he always testifies to other learners as well. And he says, I wouldn't have done this if it wasn't for someone who decided to start this program. So it's small things like that that make you realize the impact of the work that we do, or the work that you do as a person, that you may think at the moment that it's very small, or you're just starting a program or a leadership program, but it actually transforms and changes the life of a person. And now we have him being one of the brightest lawyers in the country, you know, or being in training to becoming one of the brightest lawyers in the country, only because we decided to start a dialogue, to start, you know, a program, you know, and to have a leadership program. So it's those things for me that make you realize that, you know, it's very impactful. But it's also those words that do not ever despise, you know, the humble or the small things or the small beginnings that we do. The small leadership programs we do, the hugest impact. We see it in people's real lives, and we see people's lives being impacted.
Great. Lelethu, what will be your last word? Thank you so much for everything. It was amazing. We got an excellent debate. What will be your last word?
Well, I think my last words are just thank you so much for the interview, and also just that we are willing to partner, you know, around the world and to continue doing the work that we do. I think there's so much more that we could do, not just as an organization, but as a continent, as Africa in general. So we are willing to work with other organizations, we're willing to work with other institutions to continue with the work that we do. And yeah.
Thank you so much. So we'll speak to you next time.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.